Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to continue our conversation with Katie Rich and Heather Sundahl, a couple of authors from 50 Years of Exponent II. We're going to talk more about the organization, and we're going to dive deep into the Sonia Johnson and ERA rights amendment issues back in the 70s. We'll also dive into Ordain Women and how activism is treated within the church. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Well, very good. So was the next big issue then the Equal Rights Amendment, would you say?
So in Massachusetts, so the ERA in 1972 was brought up again in Congress, and it had a certain time frame in which to have ratification from enough states. And so early on, a bunch of states passed it, including Massachusetts. And so the women in Boston are not really wrestling with the Equal Rights Amendment because their state had already ratified it. But as there's this march to ratification, Phyllis Schlafly and the Stop ERA movement comes in and becomes this broad right-wing coalition to stop the Equal Rights Amendment. And she comes and meets with Barbara Smith, who is president of the Relief Society, and convinces her that this is a moral issue, that the Equal Rights Amendment, which is very simple, it's about not discriminating against based on the basis of sex, right?
It's not radical.
It's not radical, but
that's not what I hear.
She convinces her that this is a threat to families, and she goes to the general authorities, some of whom are already concerned about it, but they decided that's not the church's role to step in. And they decide, okay, actually, we are going to use our whole church structure to go into states where ratification is maybe going to happen and employ our ward and state structure to look like a grassroots movement, to write the legislatures, show up at meetings, and shut down the Equal Rights Amendment. And so they're part of this broader coalition, but the church in key states, including Utah, Virginia, New York, they become part of this movement to shut down the Equal Rights Amendment, and they are successful. And so in 1977, there's every state has these International Women's Year meetings leading up to this national meeting. And the church deploys women and says every ward needs to send 10 women to go to the Utah International Women's Year meeting in Salt Lake and vote
no on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, crazy things like what are some of the things they vote no on that are
greater protections against women who have been raped.
Yeah. I mean, just really,
that seems really strange.
Thing is just, it just doesn't
Women
make any
just don't
sense.
need to be
Early
protected.
childhood education.
And watch Mrs. America on Hulu.
Yeah.
That's a little, what I would call a mini series.
Taylor Petrie told me the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so tens of thousands of women. I mean, I think they expected 2,000 to 3,000, and 13,000 women show up to this meeting in Salt Lake and vote against every proposal and vote against the Equal Rights Amendment, which then, of course, influences the legislature to not ratify. And so the women in Boston are getting a flood of letters and comments of what happened here, because members of the church had been largely supportive of the Equal Rights Amendment. Idaho had already passed the amendment, had already ratified.
Idaho.
And after all of this, Idaho tries to rescind the ratification after the church comes out against it. So they're hearing from all these people, what does this mean? They're looking back at the women's exponent years when Mormon women were at the forefront of the women's movement and for women's suffrage and other aspects of women's rights.
Yeah, Utah and Wyoming were they argue about who was the first state to allow women to vote. But anyway, that was Mountain West.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's from, what did one writer say? From the vanguard to the rear guard.
Yeah.
Was how it flipped with us.
And that they are seeing this change in women's power, that the Relief Society used to do huge things. They were the first social workers in Utah. They ran hospitals. They had publications. They raised money. They did a lot of things more than what we're seeing that they're doing now. And we're seeing the church come in and shut down even a movement for equal rights on a constitutional level. They're like, what's going on? And so people are grappling with this. And the trouble is that they're grappling with it from a very faithful perspective, which leads to a lot of conflict. They're like, I don't want to speak out against the prophet, the first presidency, the church leaders. I'm an active, faithful member. And so Exponent becomes a place where people get to write about the conflict that they're feeling, the cognitive dissonance, and the struggle, and like, how do I move forward with what is happening here against the Equal Rights Amendment? And then, of course, Sonia Johnson and Mormons for ERA in Virginia are making big waves.
And she was in Kate Kelly's ward.
Was she later?
Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that, but they met in the same building. I don't think they lived there at the same time, but yeah, that's. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sonia becomes the face of Mormons for ERA, which is not part of Exponent II, but she is does have a poem published in there. But Sonia, who is just this firebrand and speaks about this covert effort that the church was putting forth to put down the ERA, and they weren't registering as a lobbying group, as an anti-ERA lobbying group. They weren't
following the rules.
No.
Yeah, and they weren't open about what their intention was here. They were trying to make it look grassroots and quiet. And she was upset about that. And she goes head to head with Orrin Hatch on the Senate floor about it, and gives these big speeches about what patriarchy is doing here. And she gets excommunicated in 1979. And then that becomes the next wave of big conflict, because so many women are like, wait, I actually believe what Sonia is saying. And then the church excommunicates her, not for moral issues, but because she's publicly speaking in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment and opposing the church's covert efforts to squash a constitutional amendment. And so she's excommunicated, which of course has huge theological implications. That if you're married in the temple and you create this eternal family unit and you're excommunicated, that is believed to break apart your eternal family. And they understand the weight of excommunication, and it's about politics, not about morality. And so a lot of women are like shocked that the church would do that. You know, we're not at the September 6th excommunications in the 90s and many excommunications that follow. And for this generation, this is just this watershed moment of like, I can't believe that the church would excommunicate somebody for having a different political belief. So Sonia Johnson was excommunicated in 79, and Diane McKinney talks about editing out the anger because they wanted women to be able to share their individual experiences, but wanted women to be heard. And then they hear that Sonia Johnson is going to come to Boston in early 1980 to do some radio interviews. And she calls ahead to Exponent and it's like, hey, I could come meet with you. And some people are like, no, like you are too controversial. And then Judy Dushku is like, wait a second. Like
Controversy is my middle name.
Yes. Always kind of viewed as the more radical one in Exponent. She's like, I'm going to host her at my house. This isn't going to be a formal Exponent event, but I'm going to invite all of the Exponent women and anybody else who wants to come, because it was important to her that not only that she shows support to Sonia, and she felt very deeply for Sonia and what Sonia had been going through getting excommunicated. But she also understood that there was this threat to women speaking. So she wanted to give support to Sonia, invite anybody who wanted to come, and show her neighbors who were not LDS in Watertown, Massachusetts, close to Boston, that that I'm not afraid of showing support to Sonia. And it just becomes this little moment of doing something that she understands that she can't speak for the Exponent board here, because Exponent is trying to be a space where people can share their individual experiences, but also not trying to upset the brethren at this point. There was just this big, huge excommunication.
It had this whole big thing with Tom Perry and Robert Hales.
Yeah, but also there have always been women who are more conservative, more traditionally following that are part of Exponent. And we want to respect those voices as well. I mean, this thing with Judy, it reminds me of one year at the retreat, Kate Kelly was there, and we had a panel that discussed women in the priesthood and ordination. And so Exponent has never, we rarely come out and kind of take a universal stance and say, this is what we all believe.
We're pro-ERA or we're anti-ERA.
Yeah, no, we're just like, you do you, and we're happy to let you share your voice here. And we've had so many of those things where we had Carolyn Pearson come and be our keynote talking about the ghosts,
Policy of exclusion.
the ghosts of
Eternal polygamy.
eternal polygamy, kind of anti any kind of polygamy. And then other people, Laura Ulrich, she was working on her book, A House Full of Females, which is all about polygamy. And it's like, there's room. Two people can share very different opinions. You can accept those opinions even if you don't agree with them. That accepting and agreeing are two very different things. And the Exponent is like, we'll accept this stuff. And the other thing that I think is everyone is learning as this is going on with Sonia is that there is a very big difference in the church between what you believe and how publicly you talk about those beliefs. And so I'm not a public figure. I can kind of say whatever I want. But if I have a big platform and I say those things, I am going to be in an entirely different situation. And so plenty of people thought the exact same things that Sonia did, but were never excommunicated. She wasn't excommunicated for her beliefs. She was excommunicated for being defiant in the way she shared those beliefs.
Or her politics, would that be a thing? Because I think, if we look at Harry Reid, he was a good church member, but yet he supported abortion rights, which was against the church standard. Because this is always the one thing. So how do you decide if you're going to get in trouble versus not? And I think it comes down to activism. I don't think Harry Reid he wasn't an activist like Sonia was. He may have supported it, but it was more of a quiet support. Is that kind of the difference? Because this is the question. I get people all the time that talk to me because I talk to people from all across the spectrum. I don't agree with all my guests, but I try to do what Exponent's doing with allowing lots of opinions. I try to hide mine for the most part, although they of course leak out. But is that the thing? Because people are like, well, you talk to polygamists and you talk to feminists and you talk to all sorts of people who don't agree with the church, people who support women's ordination. Do you get in trouble? And I, knock on wood, so far I haven't. But is that, can we put that as the thing? Is activism is your issue? You can talk about things if you do it quietly?
I don't know. I think people can be activists, but if nobody knows who you are, nobody cares.
How public your activism is.
How public your activism is. Like if your activism is shown up on camera, on TV, or if you kind of become prominent, it's a problem. But if you're active but nobody knows you, nobody cares.
Right. So
it's your reach.
I think it's your reach.
That's part of
I do. I think it's your reach.
And then what counts as activism? Because some people view having any type of paper or publication as activism. And so is Exponent II having, starting as a quarterly paper, now there's a magazine, there's a blog, there's social media channels, is just sharing people's voices with lots of different topics and experiences. Is that activism? In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. Because Exponent II is not Mormons for ERA out of Virginia with all of that public direct activism. They're not Ordain Women. They are a place of feminist platform to share a variety of perspectives across the whole Mormon continuum. Whether you're active in the church or whether you're not active in the church, there's space within Exponent. Is that activist just to help people build their voices?
It can be. I think that women's voices are often perceived as dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, Emma Smith.
They are dangerous, aren't they?
Yeah. Okay, let's circle back really quickly to L. Tom Perry,
Okay.
to the library. BYU.
Yeah.
So the special collections at BYU is the L. Tom Perry
Special
collections. And this is where Exponent started sending our documents. And so they house our stuff.
Should have sent them to the U.
And there's been lots of debate about that over the years. And it wasn't his name at the time,
No,
right?
it wasn't.
So it's just the
It
BYU
wasn't.
archives. And in 1977, they understand that they're doing something historic here. The paper's lasted a few years now. And so they start sending communications and, letters to the editor and drafts and all of this to the archive at BYU, which is now...
Which made your book a lot easier to research, right?
Oh my gosh.
It's what made it possible.
So grateful
Yeah.
for the L. Tom Perry special collections.
Yeah.
John Murphy, mwah,
Yeah.
bless you.
So they have minutes and financial records and subscription records. I mean, and that's what we spent so much time in researching this book. They have 40 plus boxes.
Yeah. And then this last year was in the fall. I think it was, or
It's in
summer.
March for Women's History Month.
So yeah, they had a whole thing on Exponent II
Oh, wow.
in the BYU library in the L. Tom Perry, and it just felt like so
That subversive
perfect.
publication?
Yes,
Yeah.
but we loved it. We loved that the value of scholarship at BYU sort of superseded any political or tension, and it was a great moment. It felt really good.
Yeah. So you have to go down there and see these boxes exhibiting content from the archives over 50 years, and they included our book. And, for both of us, we're both BYU grads, and we know that there's still these tensions. Are feminist voices scary? Are they dangerous? What does community over ideological purity mean when we get to these big moments? Like you've mentioned Kate Kelly a couple times and the Ordain Women movement. And so what does that mean for Exponent?
Well, and I know that was a big issue within Exponent II, was talking about ordained women. We haven't gotten to that yet, but
Yeah.
and I kind of previewed it a little bit, but
So Heather were you president of the board at the time?
Probably, I don't remember.
it's weird having this is living history.
Yeah.
This is your history.
Yeah.
It is.
So
And I need Katie to remember it for me.
So this is when we bridge the technological divide. So, Exponent was founded in Boston and was there for decades. And then we have, so Nancy Dredge and Heather Sundahl are associate editors, and the blog starts with this group from Southern California, like Caroline Klein and Jana Remy. They had found these old exponents, and they were really interested, and they wanted to be able to bring these conversations online. The Bloggernacle starting, and so they started
So we're into the 90s now, right?
2000s. Like,
2000s, okay.
2006, January 2006, the blog starts, and so there's like Feminist Mormon Housewives and Exponent II talking about all these feminist issues, and along with all of these other great blogs in the Bloggernacle, and these conversations are just allowing for discussion of things that maybe Exponent was more limited about before, but when everyone's talking about it online, it just changes what can be talked about. The paper for a short time kind of comes out of print and is an annual online-only PDF issue because everywhere print publications are going down, right? With the rise of the internet, print publications everywhere are struggling. And so there's more eyes than ever on Exponent II, but fewer people are subscribing or wanting print publications because they're doing all the reading online. But then in 2010, they decide that it's really essential that we do have that print publication and a place to be able to sit with these long-form stories. And for the first time, it moves outside of Boston. And so Amy Hickman and Emily Clyde Curtis become the editors of the new full in-color print magazine. And we've had that as a quarterly magazine ever since 2010. So we have the blog going that can have these more in-the-moment, quick responsive conversations and more flexibility to talk about controversial issues as they come up, because that's just the nature of the internet. And then we also have this quarterly print magazine now that has beautiful art, and it has this ability to editorially curate a variety of voices and perspectives, which allows people to sit with one issue, sometimes open theme, but often on a particular theme where they can hear from people from different ages, different backgrounds, different perspectives, and have art that makes it all more beautiful and complex. and to sit with different perspectives. And so when Ordain Women comes up, a lot of the initial profiles that they did, because they kind of followed the I'm a Mormon campaign style with like, and I believe in ordaining women. And so they have these individual profiles. And a lot of the early profiles were Exponent II bloggers, but it was not Exponent II joining or having an official stance. And so what happened with the priesthood issue in the magazine?
So the priesthood issue.
And by the way, before you answer that, when did you really get involved? Was it before the 2006 area? It was in the 1990s?
Yeah, I was
96?
96 is when I started writing and editing with Exponent. And then when was I co-editor with Nancy? I was
In the early
in
2000s.
the early 2000s.
Okay. So in the early 2000s, this is when the bloggernacle was getting online.
That's like the 2006 is when we started our blog.
Okay.
So, and when we're getting that issue together, the priesthood one, we really wanted to show the complexity of the issue and the many different ways that women who identify as feminists and also faithful, how that can show up for them. Because people are like, oh, well, you're a feminist, you want to ordain women. Like, well, maybe not. Like, you can't just put people in a box with these labels. And so as Katie's saying, when you have an issue on one thing, you can have things sort of sit in tension with each other. And two of my favorite articles from that issue are Abby Hansen, whose husband was in the military, and so he's gone, and she talks about, and she's a member of Ordain Women. There's a little documentary on her if you want to go find that. But she talks about how painful it was for her to not be able to give or receive blessings from women because her husband's off, so she has to have some random home teacher that she just doesn't even feel connected with at all offer to give her a blessing, and she's like, I don't even know if I want this from him. And then you have Diane Pritchett, who was in Boston, tell about, she was the Relief Society president in her ward. A woman in the ward had severe postpartum depression, like suicidal, really, really bad. And so she and the bishop and I think maybe home visiting teachers show up at the house, and Diane says she needs a blessing. And everybody in the room looks at Diane. And then Diane lays her hands on the woman's head and gives her a blessing. Diane's of the opinion, I don't need to agitate for other people to give me power. I have my own power. I just have to be willing to use it. And you can't write Diane off, but you can't write Abby off either. It's like both of them, when you read it, you're like, yes, you are right. You're absolutely right. And you can see it. And I love that Exponent does that. One of the things that I've noticed in Relief Society since I, very first started attending at 18 is that in Relief Society, if someone's, has an opinion, if somebody expresses something that looks like a dissenting opinion, you can feel it in the room. Like this little charge of anxiety goes through the room. And somebody will very quickly raise her hand and say, well, what I think we're all trying to say is, and then we'll make some comment that kind of tries to pull everything together so that there's that sameness, so that nobody's disagreeing because, contentions of the devil. I mean, you can just take it.
It works that way in priesthood too.
Yeah, and Exponent teaches people to sort of sit with some of that discomfort, to sit with an opinion that maybe you don't totally disagree with, but ideally the person is not saying, this is what I believe and everyone else needs to believe that. They're saying, this is what I believe and why, based on this experience. And it's a lot harder to discount somebody's experience than it is to discount ideology.
Yeah.
And then Katie is always saying, your famous line,
Community over ideological purity. That's what Exponent II is about. And from the beginning, before they ever had general authorities come in and question them and encourage them to shut down, from these early issues, we see them putting different perspectives on the same page and that was, they knew that they had huge differences among them. And their intention was to let them sit with different perspectives.
Did you guys dive into, because I know Jonathan Stapley and Christine Wright have written on the history of women giving blessings. I mean, Mormon women could lay hands on the sick up until the 30s.
And the last time it was mentioned in the Relief Society manual was in 1968. I think it was saying don't do it, but it was mentioned. And the fact that they're saying don't do it means people were doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we talk briefly about that history here. I mean, and in context of Exponent women participating in giving blessings. And what's interesting is that this is still happening. It's not just a special feminist thing. And it's actually feminists who are often less comfortable with, like, can I claim this power to do this than some women who maybe wouldn't use the title as feminist and just view themselves as faithful and feel that confidence. And so in private situations across the globe, Mormon women are participating in giving blessings by laying on of hands, but we don't talk about it and we don't teach it.
Because you'll get in trouble if you do.
Yes. Yeah. So it's happening, with sick babies, with sick spouses, with
People in crisis who
visiting
need
teachers.
something articulated out loud.
Yeah. And a prayer doesn't feel as enough as opposed to some touch, some physical connection there as well. And so there are moments at the Exponent retreat that we've talked about in the book where people participate in giving those blessings by, and it's often a little different than priesthood. It's like, how do you want to be touched? On your head, on your shoulders, on your arm? Who would you like to participate?
Yes, there's lots of
speaking?
language of consent.
Yeah, and an individual experience. But that's not special to Mormon feminists. It's happening all over. We just don't talk about it.
Because we get in trouble. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Heather Sundahl and Katie Rich, a couple of authors from 50 Years of Exponent II. In our next conversation, we're going to dive into the FBI embezzlement story with Exponent II. I was very surprised to read about that, as well as talk more about the history.
You're talking about the embezzlement issue.
Right.
Yeah. So was it 2017 that it was discovered?
I don't know. I like start rocking in a corner when we talk about it. Because I was president at the time.
Oh, you were?
Felt, and
Yeah.
It felt like a betrayal.
Jansen, the new treasurer, and I, we discovered it together. Like we sort of pieced together what had happened.
So this is really
it was
personal.
Really, really personal. And she was a good friend.
If you'd like to hear the entire conversation without any interruptions, sign up at patreon.com/gospeltangents and you can hear the entire video or audio uncut, whichever you'd like. So this is part of the Gospel Tangents podcast network, and so please sign up today and support Gospel Tangents.